Well, today we're tackling Alan Watts.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, he's the mind-bending philosopher, right?
Definitely. Always seems to turn things upside down.
Exactly. With Watts,
Hmm.
nothing's ever quite as it seems.
I can imagine.
We're going to unpack some seriously intriguing stuff, like what does it really mean, to find yourself by losing yourself?
Right.
Can accepting the unknowable actually be, liberating?
Interesting.
And how do good intentions sometimes lead to, spiritual phoniness?
Watts definitely has a knack for taking those seemingly straightforward ideas and revealing incredible depth.
I know.
He pulls from all these different traditions, Eastern philosophy, Western religion, even modern physics,
Wow.
to illuminate these very human dilemmas.
It's true. It's like he's showing us how to think differently about things we thought we already understood.
Yeah.
One of the first things that grabbed my attention was this Buddhist poem Watts quotes. It goes, "While living, be a dead man." He brings it up in the essay, The Paradox of Self-Denial.
Talk about a head scratcher.
I know, right? I mean, how many times have we heard about self-improvement, about pushing ourselves to be better?
All the time.
This seems like the complete opposite.
Totally.
What do you think? Is Watts really saying we should just, give up on all ambition?
Well, not quite.
Okay.
I think it's more like he's pointing to the trap of trying to force selflessness or humility. Think of Marie Antoinette playing shepherdess in her fancy gardens at Versailles.
Oh, right.
Or those corporate execs escaping to fishing shacks for the weekend.
I see what you mean.
They're trying to perform simplicity, but it all feels a bit, artificial.
Okay, so it's about authenticity then.
Yeah.
But how do you actually escape that trap? Because even if you want to be less selfish or more humble, isn't trying to make yourself that way just another form of ego tripping?
That's exactly the paradox Watts is getting at. And he has this brilliant image to illustrate it. A mosquito biting an iron bull.
A what?
A mosquito biting an iron bull.
Okay.
It's from Zen Buddhism.
Yeah.
No matter how hard that mosquito tries, it's not going to make a dent in that iron hide.
Makes sense.
And trying to force yourself to be something you're not is equally futile.
Yeah, I can definitely feel that analogy. All those times I've tried to force myself to be more disciplined or more patient,
Yeah.
only to end up frustrated and feeling like a failure.
It's exhausting.
It really is.
And often counterproductive.
Yeah.
Watts would probably say it's because you're approaching the problem from the wrong angle.
Okay.
He points out that many people who've actually achieved a state of genuine selflessness or humility often describe it as something that happened to them. Yeah. Not something they achieve through willpower.
Interesting.
It's more about grace than grit, he'd say.
So if forcing self-denial is a trap, how do we actually become who we are in a genuine way?
Well, that's where Watts' essay, Become What You Are, comes into play.
Yeah.
He argues that most of us are so busy trying to become some idealized version of ourselves that we miss the reality of who we already are in this very moment.
I think a lot of people struggle with that feeling like they're always chasing some future self and never quite feeling content with who they are right now.
Right.
Do you think that's because we're, always told to strive for more, to never settle?
That's definitely part of it. We're conditioned to believe that happiness lies somewhere in the future.
Yeah.
Once we've achieved a certain goal or reached a certain status.
Right.
But Watts suggests that this constant striving actually disconnects us from the present moment, from the flow of life itself.
Huh.
He uses the concept of Tao to describe this flow.
Okay, the Tao. I've heard of it, but to be honest, it always seemed a bit mystical and hard to grasp.
Sure.
Can you break it down for us?
Yeah.
How does it relate to becoming who you are?
It's often translated as the way or nature.
Okay.
It's this underlying principle of the universe, a natural order that moves and works by itself. You can't force it, you can't control it, you can only align yourself with it.
So are we supposed to just give up on goals and let the Tao sweep us along?
Well,
It sounds a bit passive.
yeah.
Does it mean we shouldn't try to improve ourselves at all?
Not exactly. It's more about recognizing that you are a part of that flow. You are life existing right here, right now.
Right.
You can't be anything other than that no matter how hard you try. So become what you are.
I love that. Become what you are.
Yeah.
It's so simple yet so profound.
It is.
But how do we reconcile that with our very human desire to, seek, to strive, to become more than we are right now?
It's the tension Watts explores in so many of his works. He talks about this trap of seeking,
Right.
where we mistake the teaching for the experience itself.
Hmm.
It's like in the essay, The Finger in the Moon.
Yeah.
He says we focus so much on the finger pointing at the moon that we forget to actually look at the moon.
Oh, I see.
We get so caught up in the how
Right.
that we lose sight of the what.
Okay, so how do we break free of that cycle?
Yeah.
It's like our whole culture is built around reaching for the next thing,
Yeah.
the next promotion, the next gadget, the next relationship.
Watts introduces this concept of wu-wei,
Okay.
often translated as non-doing or effortless action.
Effortless action.
It's about acting in harmony with the natural flow of things, rather than constantly pushing and forcing.
Yep.
Instead of swimming upstream, you learn to ride the current.
But isn't that a bit of a paradox?
Yeah,
If you try to practice non-doing,
right.
aren't you sort of doing something?
Exactly.
How can you aim for effortlessness without effort?
And Watts loves highlighting these paradoxes.
true.
He uses this striking image of a self-shooting arrow.
A self-shooting arrow.
How can an arrow shoot itself? It's impossible. The very effort creates a contradiction.
Okay, my brain is definitely starting to bend a bit here.
And to drive home the point that we're often trapped in these cycles, he uses the image of Ouroboros,
Ouroboros.
the snake biting its own tail.
Oh, right.
He talks about it becoming conscious all the way around,
Right.
realizing that the tail's just another end of the head.
I get it.
You're going in circles.
So if we can't force ourselves into harmony with the Tao, how do we actually get there?
yeah.
Is it just luck?
I mean,
Or are we doomed to this endless loop of striving and seeking?
Watts tackles this feeling of being trapped head-on in several of the essays you've provided.
Okay.
In The Language of Metaphysical Experience, he flips the script on skeptics who say concepts like God are meaningless because they can't be proven.
Now that's interesting. How does he do that?
He points out that even scientific concepts like energy or electron are ultimately unknowable. We can measure them, we can describe their effects, but their essence remains a mystery.
So he's saying there are limits to what we can know.
Exactly.
Okay.
Even our own sense of self, when you really get down to it, becomes an unknowable at its root.
That's a bit unsettling, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
To think that the very foundation of who we are is something we can't even fully grasp.
It can be, but Watts finds a sense of wonder in that. He even quotes Goethe saying, the highest to which man can attain is wonder. It's about letting go of the need to control everything and embracing the mystery of existence.
Okay, I'm starting to see where the liberation comes in. If you give up on trying to define and control the unknowable, you free yourself from a lot of unnecessary struggle.
Precisely. And Watts ties this back to self-denial, but now from the angle of giving up on futile problems.
Okay.
Like those circular questions he critiques, knowing the knower, proving the proof, they all stem from this feeling of being isolated.
Yeah.
Separate from the universe, like we're cut off from the source.
He talks about feeling uprooted, right?
Exactly.
Like we've lost our connection to something fundamental.
And he says that resisting this feeling of insecurity, of not knowing, actually strengthens it. He calls it the law of reversed effort.
Law of reversed effort. Interesting.
The more you grip, the more it slips away. The more you try to force yourself into a state of certainty,
Yeah.
the more uncertain you become.
But this brings up a really important question.
Yeah.
If effort is ultimately futile,
Right.
how do we actually live? We can't just sit around contemplating the unknowable all day, right? We have to make decisions, take action, navigate the world.
That's the crux of it, isn't it? And that's where it gets even trickier, because even our good intentions can trip us up.
Watts is pretty skeptical of those good intentions, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
I mean, it seems like he's saying that even trying to be a good person can backfire.
It's not that he's against being good.
Right.
It's more that he's wary of those good intentions masking deeper issues.
Sure.
Like in the essay Good Intentions, he warns against renouncing the world simply because you're bad at it. It's easy to spiritualize our failures, to pretend that we're above material concerns, when really we're just avoiding the challenges of actually living.
So he's saying true renunciation isn't about escaping the world. It's about engaging with it in a more conscious way.
Exactly. And that's where the essay, Tomorrow Never Comes, fits in.
Okay.
Watts points out that we can't force the future to happen. We can't control it, no matter how much we plan or strategize.
Right.
We're always putting off living for some imagined future that never actually arrives.
It's like we're on this treadmill, constantly running but never getting anywhere. He has this beautiful image of waiting for the far-off divine event.
Yeah.
A poem about how that kind of thinking keeps us trapped in a state of perpetual anticipation.
And in the process, we miss the beauty and richness of what's happening right here, right now. So how do we step off that treadmill?
I think this is where Watts' love for Zen Buddhism comes in, because Zen is all about being present, isn't it? Dealing with reality as it is without all the mental baggage.
Yes. And what's so interesting about Zen is that it doesn't have a fixed dogma.
Right.
It's not about believing in a specific set of ideas or following a rigid set of rules. It's about direct experience.
Okay.
About waking up to the reality that's happening right in front of you.
It's like those Zen koans, those paradoxical riddles that are meant to, like, break you out of your habitual ways of thinking.
Exactly.
They don't make logical sense, but they point to a deeper truth.
And Watts is a master at using paradox to illuminate truth. He shows us how seemingly contradictory ideas can actually coexist.
Yeah.
How embracing the both hand can lead to a more holistic understanding of ourselves and the world.
It's about holding those tensions, those paradoxes, without trying to resolve them.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where opposites meet and create something new, something more dynamic and alive than either could be on their own.
Like that image Watts uses of walking on a wheel. You have to keep moving to stay balanced,
Right.
but you also have to be mindful of the wheel's movement so you don't fall off.
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding that delicate balance between acceptance and engagement,
Yeah.
between going with the flow and still making conscious choices.
So it's not about being passive,
Right.
but about being responsive, attuned to the situation.
Precisely. It's about cultivating that kind of mindful awareness that Zen emphasizes,
Right.
that ability to see things clearly without all the mental clutter.
And that's a pretty radical idea, especially in a culture that's so obsessed with productivity and control.
It is, and it's a challenge.
We've been wrestling with some pretty mind-bending ideas about this whole becoming who you are thing,
Definitely.
but I think there's one big question still hanging in the air.
What's that?
We keep hinting at this idea that we're already perfect,
Yeah.
already enlightened, just as we are. But honestly, that can sound a little too good to be true, you know?
Yeah.
It can even feel like a bit irresponsible.
Right.
Like, if we're already perfect, why bother trying to improve ourselves at all?
Right.
Wouldn't that just lead to complacency?
That's the challenge Watts presents. He doesn't shy away from that tension between our inherent wholeness and our very human desire to, grow and evolve. In
Yeah.
fact, he sees it as a key part of the spiritual journey.
He even tackles this in the context of faith,
He does.
specifically the tension between faith and works in Buddhism.
Yes. He dives into these concepts of jiriki, which is all about self-power, the idea that we can achieve enlightenment through our own effort, and then there's turiki,
Right.
which is about other power, the idea that we're saved by grace, by something bigger than ourselves.
And Juan seems to lean more towards the Tariki side, right?
Yeah.
Like in the story of Shinran, who completely abandoned the idea of achieving enlightenment through his own striving, and instead just put his faith in Amida Buddha's compassion.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is how Watts connects this to a real psychological shift.
Okay.
He argues that when we let go of needing to prove ourselves to earn our worthiness,
Yeah.
we actually experience a profound sense of freedom.
It's like we can finally relax into who we truly are without all that judgment and self-criticism constantly gnawing at us.
Precisely. And this doesn't mean we become passive or complacent.
Right.
In fact, Watts suggests that it can actually lead to a much deeper sense of responsibility and a more genuine engagement with the world.
Because we're no longer driven by fear or insecurity.
Exactly.
We can act from a place of, like, wholeness and compassion.
Exactly. And this is where Watts' ideas about morality get really interesting.
Okay. How so?
He's not saying we should just throw out all ethical considerations.
Right.
He's suggesting that our actions should flow naturally from this understanding of our interconnectedness with everything.
It's like that Buddhist saying, hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we're all part of the same web of life.
Yeah.
And that our actions have consequences that ripple outwards, affecting not just ourselves, but everyone and everything around us.
So true morality isn't about following a bunch of rigid rules. It's about cultivating this deep sense of empathy and compassion.
Precisely. And Watts reminds us that this kind of morality isn't something we have to force or manufacture.
Hmm.
It arises naturally when we let go of our ego-driven desires and align ourselves with that flow of the Tao we were talking about earlier.
It's like we're tapping into this deeper wisdom, this fundamental goodness that's already present within us.
That's a great way to put it, and Watts would argue that this is what it truly means to become who you are.
Yeah.
It's about realizing our true nature,
Hmm.
which is inherently good, wise, and compassionate.
So it's not about achieving some kind of superhuman perfection, but about recognizing the perfection that's already present, even in our imperfections.
Exactly. It's a radical idea, especially in a culture that's so obsessed with self-improvement and achievement.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be fully human,
Yeah.
to make mistakes, to stumble and fall without losing sight of our inherent worthiness.
And that's a powerful message of hope, I think.
It is.
Because it means we don't have to strive for some unattainable ideal.
Right.
We can simply be who we are right here, right now. And in that being, we discover our true freedom and purpose.
Listening to all this, I can't help but think about how much pressure we put on ourselves to constantly be fixing ourselves, to be better, to be more. It's almost like we're afraid to just be.
It's a common struggle. We're constantly bombarded with messages about what we lack, what we need to improve. But Watts offers us a different perspective.
Okay.
He invites us to embrace the present moment with all its imperfections and to see the beauty and wonder that's unfolding all around us.
And to realize that the journey itself, the destination.
Yeah.
There's no finish line. There's no point at which we finally arrive and become perfect.
Right.
It's an ongoing process of discovery.
Beautifully said. And that's really the heart of Watts's message. He wants us to wake up to the richness of our own experience, to stop chasing after some illusory future, and to discover the infinite potential that's already present within each of us.
That's an incredibly liberating thought. It makes me want to take a deep breath and just be.
And that's a perfect place to leave it. Let go of the struggle, embrace the present moment, and trust that you are already everything you need to be.
That's a beautiful note to end on. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a sense of peace after this deep dive.
Me too. It's a good reminder that the spiritual journey isn't about striving and seeking, it's about surrendering and discovering.
And that's something we can all benefit from remembering, no matter where we are on our own paths. So to our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, keep asking those tough questions, and keep diving deeper into the mystery of who you truly are.